The theme running through today's reading seems to be that of correction, and we find it coming in Prophet Ezekiel, which has been taken up by the saint we had in the course of the weeks, in Gregory the Great, who has in his pastoral rule a manual for pastors which had a huge influence on the whole medieval period. Talks very clearly about this duty to correct, and he accuses those who do not function in this way when they are preaching and guiding souls of being dogs that cannot bark, canes multi, echoing the word of the prophet. And it is something that we need to ask ourselves also in our time. It applies not only to pastors of souls, to teachers of doctrine, but also to parents. The correction of someone is a matter of duty for certain people, and only certain people actually, who are in a state where they have to do it. In the monastic life, it's a grave obligation for friars, abbots, novice masters to exercise this gentle and delicate ministry for the good of their community, and if it doesn't happen, then the community itself will suffer loss. For the very bad peace, things are allowed to carry on, and then of course we know what happens. The Lord is obliged then no longer to send them vocations, and so it's in the interest of the community to be fervent. It applies also to families while we have children in our care, not to be negligent, because if that also for the kids, the same situation arising there, to have peace and quiet, one gives in, and doesn't correct, then in the long term the vice of the spoiled child comes in when he comes back to roost. And in the Gospel, it goes a stage further. The ecclesiastical duty of correcting comes in here. In fact, this is one of the two passages in the Gospel where we have the word church being used. They're both in St. Matthew. Ecclesia in Greek. It's an echo of the kahal of the Hebrews, the assembly, because the word comes from call, to call out, eklein, and so these are the called out people, assembled therefore. It is used here as in the passage of St. Matthew where he gives the keys to Peter. And again, these two passages are actually parallel. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This is chapter 18 of Matthew. The other one is chapter 16, where it's given in a personal way to St. Peter as head of the college of the apostles. So authority is given to the church. So as the ultimate resort, if he refuses to listen to them, that is, we've taken these people first of all to help us, to correct our brother, then and then only then tell it to the church. And the church has precisely this authority. If he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. We have still the discipline which is still applicable, excommunication. And in fact, we have in Ireland a problem because there is a priest who's now sort of a bishop who also is not only excommunicated, not only suspended, but excommunicated because he's been made a bishop irregularly and he's doing these marriages. That's causing problems for us who have to handle his travelling people. They come to us married by him and you can't absolve them because they're not married. It's a huge problem for the church. So the church has authority to discipline its own. And it must exercise it, otherwise that same situation will arise in the church itself. If things aren't corrected, it becomes a cancer, damaging the whole body. So, with regard to this ministry, it's also something that we need to do in charity, because correction badly done is actually counterproductive. And I remember when I was novice master, it was something extremely delicate, because you have to be able to get to the effect without damaging relationship, without hurting, wounding, losing dignity essentially, and causing that person to feel he's a victim or being, as it were, aggressed. Talking calmly on his own level is quite a different way. One indicates the reasons, the motives, and the supernatural vision of things, and then it passes quickly and quietly without any fuss or bother. But it has to happen. And no one else should be involved in it. That's actually what happened in some places where all kinds of meddles get in and cause problems when they shouldn't and haven't got grace of state to do it. Be that as it may, there is also the promise here that this has been taken up also not only by prayer groups. For instance, in the Protestant circles, this is very much a claimed promise. They hold on to this and they claim the promise in prayer that when you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done by the Father. And then, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Now that has been felt by many a group of people in prayer, even sometimes even 2 people. It's enough, because that, as it were, is a claim upon the promise. And sincere prayer, made with awareness of the third person present, is very binding. And it's important also for marriage. If people, for instance, are basing their courting life on prayer and on the Lord, it's very binding. And couples who pray a lot together risk succeeding in their marriage because there is this binding force, and they will not then easily aggress and hurt each other. The Lord is in the midst, and a child being born into that atmosphere will pick it up straight away. And tendentially one sees that children born into a prayerful atmosphere are calmer than those born into an aggressive one. And with regard to this also, it's been picked up in recent times by one very powerful movement still in the church, is the Focolare movement. They base much of their spirituality on this promise. We call it Jesus in the midst, Gesù in mezzo, or in medio, and it's there something which they live very intensely. They have been living together, consecrated people, and they live love, no hurting word, and they honour Christ in that person. They also have another one parallel to it. It's the verse which talks about the way in which the Lord is abandoned. My God, why have you abandoned me? On the cross, they see in the suffering, in the poor, in the neglected, the rejected, Jesus abandoned, Gesù abbandonato, and they honour him in a special way in those. And we must do the same. It is Jesus coming to us in that form. So, on this day, let us take with us, first of all, this importance of knowing what to correct, because we can't correct everything, and if we do, that also is counterproductive. For instance, being pernickety, either in community or, for instance, a wife might be very nagging, as we say. This kind of thing can actually lead to just the opposite effect. We know that sometimes we have to let things pass so as to concentrate on the major. I remember hearing this years ago in the monastery in France. There was one of the brethren who precisely would be often correcting without authority. He wasn't novice master, he was megling, and if he didn't get through, he would go through the novice master and that kind of thing. And the novice master, in the end, said this to us: if one corrects every possible thing, which hasn't got any importance, and then, this is the phrase I remember, one will have no authority to correct the things that matter. And he was very wise. The same applies to us. Remember Father Michael Carl in Johnstown saying one time, concerning this issue of what we have to handle in pastoral work, he said this, and he was quoting friends of his priests: we must choose our battles. By that he meant you can't make of everything an issue, and if you do, you'll never have peace, and neither will anyone else.